favourite Red Rose Gold presenters are out and about.
Red Rose Radio began broadcasting in October 1982 with a single service for the whole of Lancashire. It split frequencies in 1990 and launched Red Rose Rock FM from its FM transmitter at Winter Hill and Red Rose Gold from its AM or medium wave transmitter at Longton. Both services originate from the same building in St Paul's Square in Preston.
Hello, welcome to Red Rose Radio. You want Mike Henfield? I'll just get him for you. Hi Mike, I've got someone in reception for you.
Right Mike, I thought we'd start here in reception in the church, St Paul's Church here at Preston. It was built in 1823, by the way, and we've got a captive audience because we've got 2,000 people buried out there in the churchyard. The live ones are through in the studio here, so let's go and have a look at Studio 1 first, the Rock FM studio. Now, as you probably know, we've got two radio stations based here in the church. The first one we're going to come to is Rock FM, and that's a station that appeals, or is aimed to attract, the under 35s. So if you're any age between 5 and 10 or whatever, and 35, Rock FM's the one for you. It is an extremely fast-growing station and has been over the last couple of years. Our transmission mast is nowhere near here, by the way. Most people think it's on top of the building, but it's actually at Winter Hill on the Granada TV mast, so you can see it there when you're driving down the M61. But this is where it actually comes from. The chap in there is a guy called Jeff Graham, who actually doubles up as our programme director as well. He's filling in for someone for holiday relief this week. But you'll notice that Jeff actually stands up when he does it. I'm told that's fairly uncommon, even for disc jockeys. The material we play, obviously, is aimed at the younger element of the population, but it is true to say it's not a teeny station. We're not aiming at the 12, 13-year-olds who would normally buy, say, chart music. In fact, they buy precious little chart music these days. But the whole point is that we must narrowly target our audience. Gone are the days when we could be all things to all men, from the age of 5 to death, if you like. So why we've got two stations is the first one is to appeal to the under 35s, as I say, and Red Rose Gold, as the name implies, is the golden oldie station, which will attract, hopefully, the over 35s, like myself. Okay? So two radio stations in one building, one on FM, Rock FM, one on medium wave, AM, and that's Red Rose Gold. Well, I think we'll leave Jeff and his amazing vertical performance to the Rock FM fans. And what I'm going to do now is we're going to move back in time, because we're going to see the Golden Oldie studio. I should explain that everything is security locked. Obviously, it would be quite easy for someone to come in here, and if they could get through into the studio, make some instant protest or cause a nuisance, and obviously we can't afford that. So everything has security codes on it. So, having got through the security cordon, you'll notice that the mic is live in Studio 1, okay? Capital offence to go charging in there at the moment, because Jeff, the vertically inclined Jeff Graham, is actually doing a link between his records at the moment, and he's talking, he's got the microphone on, that's happening too. And look, they're both speaking at the same time. Amazing coincidence here at Red Rose. This is the Red Rose Gold studio. Let's go and see John Gilmore. Hi John.
Mike.
Okay, the technology is the same, the records aren't. This is the Red Rose Gold studio. Remember I said we've got two radio stations operating out of the church. This is the second Red Rose Gold on 9:99 AM, medium wave. No stereo, at least we haven't got stereo on AM in this country yet. Our presenter here, and they don't like being called disc jockeys, by the way, our presenter here is John Gilmore, who is I think it's fair to say, a veteran, John?
A veteran.
A Red Rose Gold veteran. Anybody with 3 years service in Red Rose is a veteran these days. Anyway, let me tell you about the setup here, and I know that John can add to it shortly, but we've got, I mentioned vinyl records and that their days were numbered. Well, we still have the turntables, we've still got a record library, we've still got thousands of them out there. But we don't tend to play too many these days, particularly, as I mentioned earlier, on Rock FM. But certainly some of the stuff hasn't been put on CD compilations yet, and we've on Red Rose Gold we may well play LPs or singles. So we've got 2 turntables, okay? We've got 2 CD machines over there, okay? And underneath them, those yellow lights just past John's head there, are cartridge players. Now the cartridges take the advertisements, all the advertisements. They take all the news interviews, they take all the promotion material, and above all they take all the jingles. So when you hear a jingle for Red Rose Gold or Rock FM, it's coming off one of these cartridges. Just let me show you one. Cartridge, and this is comparatively old-fashioned radio technology these days because we're into hard discs elsewhere now in our radio group, but we shall be seeing this sort of technology coming in the next 18 months, 2 years here. But this is a cartridge. It's an endless loop of tape, and it contains the message. On this one, it's a 30-second advertisement. Okay, the tape on it lasts for, we'll say, 40 seconds. So it's 30 seconds of message, 40 seconds of tape. You hit the button on that machine over there, and away goes the tape. Plays for 30 seconds, rewinds itself back to the beginning again, and stops. Next time you hit the button, it'll start dead at the start of the message. And that's the whole point. It just means that you can operate it with one button instead of lots of people with big reels of tape. So that's cartridge technology. The Red Rose Gold jingle you may just have heard in the background, that was on a cartridge too. Also, we've got tape playout for longer documentaries or music features. Remember, I did say that both of the stations here are very much music stations with hard news and sport, particularly on Red Rose Gold. I mentioned that Rock FM only had a minute or so of news per hour, and it was especially written for Rock FM. But Red Rose Gold is very much a music and news station, and the reason behind that is that older people like longer news, and that's a fact. We find that out from market research. They also like a lot more sport. So John here, when he's not to be found in this studio on a weekday afternoon, is actually in the studio to present the sports programme on a Saturday afternoon, a 4-hour programme of sport, football, cricket, rugby, tennis, whatever's on. Okay? But certainly on Red Rose Gold we provide much longer news bulletins, up to 15 minutes at certain times of the day. And I think John's going to speak fairly shortly, so I hope he's going to give me an indication of when he's going to stop.
1 minute.
1 minute to go. Okay, I should mention also that we use a system called DAT, Digital Audio Tape, which was a system introduced by Sony some years ago. Never caught on for the domestic market, but is ideal for broadcasters. On a very small reel of tape, digitally recorded, you can get up to a 2-hour show. Now, it's very, very useful. The only trouble is that sometimes when you're waiting to put the show on, you've lost the tape, it's so small. Not like the old big reel-to-reel tapes. So, there's John. He's got his desk in front of him, which really is a big mixer. And all those little knobs, coloured knobs there, you can see, are called faders. They slide up and down. They bring into play each different function. The turntables, the cartridge machine, the compact disc, and in certain cases the DAT or the reel-to-reel tape.
There we go.
Thanks, John.
Final choice today, songs of yours, the lads over in Wesham, Alf, Arthur and Tommy as well. Yours Magazine, songs of yours every afternoon, 3:10 with Yours Magazine. Yours to read, yours to do, and yours to enjoy.
But beer has been around since 1867, so there must have been some huge changes in that time.
Okay, so that's Red Rose Gold. We've got an advertising break on at the moment. So perhaps it would be a good idea to see where all the records come from. So let's look at the record library.
Oh, go on. You must be able to rustle up one teensy-weensy little change. A micro change. No. But a nano change. Can we say a nano change? No, not a jot. Burtonwood beer.
Okay, record library. Well, there are thousands of them in here. Loads and loads of records over the back here, hundreds up here, and I never actually counted them, but I should imagine we've probably got something like 20 to 30,000 discs in here, mostly on the old vinyl stuff, all these lovely old black plastic dusty grooves, and all, of course, replaced by the simple CD. Okay, so I think the next place we go to will be the sales department. Now that's right at the end of the corridor here and up the stairs. We're going to pass Studio 3. And Studio 3, and you've seen the other two studios, so it's more or less the same, but it's actually where we make all the local commercials, in that studio there. It's interesting to note that the church itself was bought by the consortium that set up Red Rose Radio back in 1981-82 for £35,000. It had been derelict for 10 years, and the whole thing, gravestones and all, £35,000. You couldn't even buy a starter home for that. And here we've got a starter radio station.
Red Rose Radio, playing music and listening to what you say. Red Rose, let you know all the news that's happening every day, everything you want to hear. Instrument Lancashire, loud and clear. 301 Red Rose Radio.
Okay, well, this is one thing you wouldn't have seen in the original church. That's the floor at this level. As you can see, we kept in all the original pillars, mainly to keep the roof up, but put this floor in. Now, this department here, this whole area here, is involved in sales. When I say sales, I mean selling the airtime. It's a major form of revenue for this radio station, for our radio stations. Selling airtime in terms of seconds. Now, you don't just buy one advert. No point in advertising a car and just putting it on once for 30 seconds. You buy a whole series of advertisements over a certain period of time, say a week, 2 weeks, a month, whatever. And the rate for the advertisement depends on the time of day. So in other words, when you've got more listeners tuning in, it'll cost you more for your 30-second advert than another time when listeners are not so thick on the ground. Okay. However, we've got lots of listeners, very quickly add. In fact, about 500,000 throughout the whole of Lancashire, Merseyside, parts of Greater Manchester and South Cumbria. So 500,000 regular listeners to both our radio stations in total. What we do is we sell airtime between the records, around the news bulletins, around the sports programme, etc. The gentleman down there has just come off the phone. We'll be talking to an advertising agency. Now, behind me, if we can just swing behind, I've got one of our sales executives talking to the chap who actually writes the scripts. Okay, so that's an advert in the making. They all finish up on those cartridges that you've seen down in the studio. But we've obviously got to sell them. We've got to go and talk to the local shop, the local garage, or the big advertising agency. We get national advertisers who are dealt with by an agency in London. We talk to local advertising agencies in everywhere from Edinburgh to Bristol, from Manchester to Plymouth. From that, we will make up a series of advertisements, and obviously we know how much per month, more or less, we're getting in from those. The only other source of revenue, the only other major source of revenue is promotions and sponsorship. two sources of revenue, actually. Sponsorship, sponsored programs, sponsored features. Only one thing you can't sponsor, and that's the news. Totally taboo, totally verboten by the radio authority. Promotions concerns everything from selling mugs and T-shirts to the big outside broadcasts and road shows. But let's go and have a look and see how we actually get the advertisements on the air. Now, I mentioned a department with a rather strange name of traffic, and it doesn't mean that we actually go out there directing the traffic in the street. What we do is direct the advertisements to where the clients want them. So, if I'm an estate agent and I want a series of advertisements and I would like to reach a certain segment of the population, I can find out via our sales department how many people of which age group and of which social background are listening at which particular time. And I can aim my advertisements to suit them, to attract them. Okay, let's give you a case in point, perhaps a little better than an estate agent. Let's say something like a computer game. Now, obviously, this isn't going to appeal to people as ancient as me, but it's going to appeal to, say, teenagers or fairly young people. In that case, it's highly likely that the advertisement would be on Rock FM rather than Red Rose Gold, and we would look at the times of day when young people are listening, when they're tuning in large numbers, and aim the advertisements for them. But that job is down to Caroline here and her trusty computer. Okay, Caroline, I've promised our friends from the university that you're going to tell them all about the traffic department, so over to you.
Right, okay. What happens in traffic is we get orders from the sales execs, and we have to schedule them into the computer system. We have to code them up so that two of the same commodity won't go out on air together. So if, say, we've got Normid hypermarket advertising, we don't want them to go next to Tesco. So we have to code them in such a way that the two will never appear together. Once we've done that, we schedule the orders, and then we print off what we call an ad log, which looks like this. This is actually Sunday's ad log, and this is just for the FM station. We do an ad log for both stations, an AM and an FM. So if we have a look at, let's move on to 9 o'clock, Sunday morning. So this is what it's looking like Sunday morning. It shows the cartridge number. Each ad is actually kept on a cartridge, and they're in the studios, filed in numerical order. So this is the cartridge number, this is the duration of the advert, and this is the company that's advertising. And this is the time that the ad has to go out. So it's up to that presenter, who at 9 o'clock on Sunday morning is Claire Anderson, to play these 4 commercials as an ad break. When she's played them, she ticks the ad log and she signs it to say that she's played it, everything was correct, everything was there in the studio. And then that's it, it's finished, the advert's gone out. It's just down to invoicing the clients then, which our accounts department do.
Okay, well, just in case you thought it was easy, this job of selling advertisements, you're faced with that, and that is a rate card. So our sales execs don't just wander along and flog somebody an ad for a £5 or something like that. It all depends on what time of day it is, okay? And the rate will also depend on how much space we've got available on our airwaves. There's a rather complicated grid system here, which I won't go into, but basically what it means is that we charge more if we're extremely flush with adverts, and we charge more if you want to go out at a peak time of day. So the best thing to do is to plan a campaign. As I said earlier, you don't just have one ad and it's gone into the ether, no point in doing that. You plan a campaign over a certain length of time. Okay, that rate card there, this one is for gold, will tell you exactly how much it's going to cost you per spot and how much discount you get if you advertise over a certain period or you have a certain number of advertisements. That is the combined rate card, so you can go on both stations. Okay, so the same advert can go on both stations, or we target the campaign to rock or gold. I won't show you in the boardroom there, but Red Rose, I should say, is part of a group of stations which are all owned by Transworld Communications. In the group is Piccadilly Radio in Manchester. They've got 2 stations, Key 103 and Piccadilly Gold. We've got 2 stations in Leeds, Radio Air FM and Magic 828. And down in South Wales we've got Touch AM and Red Dragon FM. That's based in Cardiff. It is true to say that the pattern of ownership of commercial radio has changed dramatically, even in the 10 years since Red Rose was established. In fact, Red Rose was the first station to actually launch a group and bought those stations in Leeds and in Cardiff. But now there are about half a dozen major groups who own the lion's share of all the commercial radio stations in Britain. Now we're in the hub of Red Rose, namely the newsroom. This end is the news desk, and the far end, the sports desk. We've got half a dozen reporters and a couple of sports people, and we're responsible for the entire local news output from our area, which, as I explained earlier, is more or less the whole of Lancashire, a little bit of Merseyside, a little bit of Greater Manchester, and a little bit of South Cumbria. And from here, our news editor Richard Frediani will control his team of journalists who will go out and about in a ceaseless quest for truth. Meanwhile, down in the sports department, the quest for truth is just as concentrated, but obviously on a slightly different level. However, it's true to say that our journalists come to us from various sources. We either get them from other radio stations, or sometimes they come to us from newspapers. But mainly, I think it's fair to say nowadays that most are have been graduate trainees on various broadcast journalism courses around the country. The advantage of that is, of course, as they arrive ready trained in the art of editing the material, techniques in terms of using microphones and tape recorders, and the ability to actually go and talk to somebody and get a story out of them. I'll show you here how the cartridge system works in terms of the news, just as it does with the sales department and those promos and jingles I showed you earlier.
Okay.
The system is exactly the same. Same cartridge, endless loop of tape. In this case, it's a 40-second cartridge. Our reporter goes out with the tape recorder, gets an interview. We find the actual clip we want, the small piece of the interview that is going to go on this piece of tape. We transfer it from the portable tape recorder to there, and we write what's called a cue. That's the piece of paper that the newsreader reads in order to introduce that piece of tape. So, in other words, if we go and interview the leader of the council about the latest scandal or whatever, and we get a piece of paper from the journalist, and that will tell us exactly what the story is and lead into the leader of the council talking about it. Put the two together and you've got yourself a ready-made news package. So that's the cartridge system. IRN, Independent Radio News, is the national international news service which operates for most of the commercial stations in Britain. And it all comes up this equipment here. IRN is based in London. It's actually owned by ITN. And they perform in exactly the same way that our journalists do. They go out and get the story. So we'll say they've got an interview with John Major, assuming he's still Prime Minister when this video goes out. They have an interview with Mr. Major, take it from their tape recorder onto a tape, put it in the studio in London, find the clip, press a button, and it'll automatically start about 100 of these tape recorders around the country, in radio stations around the country. So you have John Major on this reel-to-reel tape. He's no good to us stuck here on a reel-to-reel tape, so we simply take out the cartridge once again, post it in the slot, find the piece we want, transfer it to there. Up the teleprinter over here will come the cue, the same thing that I mentioned that we do locally. The cue is the bit that gets us into the tape piece. The next thing is to meet Richard Frediani, the news editor himself, the man who's got the job of compiling the bulletins.
The news itself comes from a number of different sources. It comes from press releases, it comes from ringing the fire brigade, the police, the ambulance, it comes from tip-offs, and they're probably the third and most interesting category, the tip-off. Your contacts, the people who you meet day in, day out. As for following them up and deciding which stories we should cover, that is, at the end of the day, my job. And every news editor has their own opinions about what makes it good and what makes it a bad news story. And in some respects, there is no one definitive answer. There are general sorts of stories that all radio stations, all newspapers, all television programmes are going to do, be they job losses, be they crime stories, be they court cases. The most important thing, though, is on an independent radio station is, just like the records we play, we're trying to attract an audience, the news itself should also be interesting, and that itself should keep the audience tuned in and turned on. It's not a case of, here's the news bulletin, here's a chance to go and make a cup of tea, or here's a chance to go and walk away. The news bulletin itself is about keeping people interested and informed. That means that it's delivered in an entertaining way, it contains stories that are entertaining stories that people are going to be interested in, but also that it's factually correct. There's no point putting out a story that's wrong, because at the end of the day, there'll be, if that continues to happen, then the listener will not believe you as a news service, and you lose all credibility at the end of the day. A news bulletin goes out on Red Rose Gold, on the hour, 24 hours a day indeed, mainly local news. On Rock FM, it goes out on the half hour, and just as we have two different stations aimed at two different audiences, the news service itself is aimed at two different audiences. So on Gold, we have a much more detailed, longer bulletin explaining stories in depth. On Rock, we have a short headline service which gives people the idea of what's going on, but doesn't bore them rigid. We don't maybe use 20-second, what we call audio clips of John Major speaking. We might just summarise in 20 keywords exactly what he said. And that in itself is hard, and there's an art to doing that. So we try and offer the listener two totally different types of news service. Now, with about 2 minutes to go to the news bulletin, you'll have to excuse me because it's now time to go and read the 4 o'clock. When the newsreader comes in to read the bulletin, the first thing they must do is ensure that what we call cartridges, which contains the reports or audio bites of somebody talking, are recued. Otherwise, it ends up with the embarrassing situation where the newsreader says, "I'm sorry, I can't bring you that report." The next thing then is for the newsreader to familiarise themselves with the actual script, because again, if one doesn't get it right, if one doesn't one isn't sure about certain words, especially certain foreign place names in Bosnia or in Russia, then again one can come unstuck when you're trying to read the news. And then after that, read through the script. This is Red Rose Gold. As you can see from the time, there's just under 2 minutes to go, and in about 2 minutes time the presenter will press the jingle, and the station is then in my hands for the next 4 minutes, and I will then read the news, hopefully flawlessly, but one never knows. As I was saying, there's a variety of stories, everything from crime stories through to sports stories. Tends to be in news bulletins, in sports, in newspapers or on television, that sport often comes at the bottom of a bulletin, but it's not always the case. For instance, if we were to find out in the next few minutes that Blackburn Rovers have sacked Kenny Dalglish as manager, then that would actually be the lead story. In this case, it's about Wimbledon and the fact that Pete Sampras has just qualified for the final, and that is a story which is of interest to the many thousands of tennis fans, many thousands of sports fans who are listening to Red Rose Gold, who might be listening at work and aren't able to watch the sport on the television. about 45 seconds to go to the bulletin. One always finds it's a bit like a roller coaster ride in some respects, that as the time gets nearer to the hour, the heart starts beating more and more, and as you hear the jingle, it's like getting to the top of a roller coaster, going down the other side, and not being able to get off. You have to go on the ride straight to the end.
Box 999, Preston PR1.
Clear of throat.
Someone who corresponds regularly is the Professor over at the Old House at Home. That's a mouthful, isn't it? The Old House at Home, New Church Road in Roppenstall. Just a reminder, John, this Sunday again, if you like the music of the 60s, 70s, 80s, and the Professor is at it with his quiz as well. And this week, you can win 50 quid on 9:99 AM. This is Red Rose Gold.
The update at 4 o'clock. I'm Richard Frediani. A prisoner who strangled a convicted sex killer after hearing him joke about his crime has been jailed for life at Preston Crown Court. Anthony Cole was murdered with a knee support in his cell at Lancaster Prison. Helen Ford reports.
Simon Douglas from Carlisle took offence when he learned he was sharing a wing with Anthony Cole.
So now a 30-second report is being played about that story that I introduced from Helen Ford. And while that's playing, I've got time to read my next script, make sure I'm familiarised with it, and make sure that the next report I'm going to play is the next report in order.
At Lancaster Prison and strangled him using a knee support. Jailing him for life, the judge at Preston Crown Court told Douglas he no doubt wanted to appear the hard man to fellow inmates, but would now have a long time to regret.
A number of people are being questioned by police in Blackpool after a 29-year-old man was attacked with a machete. Dale Forshaw from Shannon Street is being treated for serious injuries in Blackpool Victoria Hospital following the wounding at the Prince's Court Flats at around 5 this morning. Kidnapper Michael Sams has told his trial at Nottingham Crown Court how he took Stephanie Slater train spotting shortly after abducting her. She was blindfolded and tied up in his car while he wrote down the numbers of express trains. James Bayes reports.
Prosecuting counsel Richard Wakely QC.
And again, I've got time to change reports and make sure the next one is ready.
And then had taken her on his train spotting trip. Sams replied, "Yes, I went train spotting with her in the car. It's incredible, but yes, I did." Earlier, the 51-year-old said he wouldn't name his mystery friend, who he claims killed prostitute Julie Dart, until he'd proved his own innocence. But the judge warned him, if you aren't prepared to identify this man to this jury, they may find it very difficult to believe.
The case of a sexually abused 8-year-old girl described as no angel by a judge who freed her attacker is to be referred to the Court of Appeal. A number of MPs and child protection groups complained when 21-year-old Carl Gambrill from Southampton was sentenced to 2 years probation for attempted unlawful sexual intercourse. The Attorney-General says the judgment was unduly lenient. South Africa has set a date for historic multiracial elections that will mark the end of 300 years of white domination. Democracy negotiators have named April the 27th next year as polling day. Workers at the Tyneside shipyard Swan Hunter are celebrating a new contract to finish work on 3 Royal Navy frigates. The yard's been devastated since losing £170 million helicopter contract to rivals VSEL in Barrow. The new deal will safeguard 1,700 jobs. Blackpool North MP Harold Ellertson is attacking the government for failing to help Lancashire police pay the cost of security at the Conservative Party's annual conference. The Tory MP says many of the resort's residents are angry that for 1 week in every year, Blackpool is swamped by police, but at other times they can't find an officer for love or money. The bill for this October's conference in Blackpool is expected to top £1 million. Tennis, top seed Pete Sampras is through to his first Wimbledon final. The world number 1 knocked out former champion Boris Becker in straight sets. More from John Anderson.
3 times former champion Becker, who adopted the people's...
Now, while this report's being played, Nigel Reid, the sports editor, brings in the latest cricket score, because cricket obviously is something that's moving all the time, the score's changing, and we could always put up a score that's 5 minutes old, but if we want to be the first with the news, the first ones to say something, then you want the latest score, so sporting while the bulletin's on.
And in cricket, Australia have lost both openers on the second afternoon of the third Test match at Trent Bridge. The tourists, replying to the England total of 321, have reached 125 for 2 in the second over after tea. And that's the update. The time now 4 minutes past 4.
And that, for love nor money, is the news bulletin. Now, once the bulletin's complete, whether it's been a good one, a bad one, an indifferent one, that's the end of the bulletin, and you make sure you go out and you get ready for the 5 o'clock news, or next bulletin that the newsreader has to read, which is the 4:30 on FM.
Well, so far you've seen news, you've seen programmes, you've seen the advertisements being put together and sold, but none of it has actually left this building. That's fine, except we won't earn any money and we won't get any listeners. So we've got to get it somehow to the transmitter, and that's where this box of tricks comes in. Let's first of all deal with a question I'm asked when I do talks, and they always say, isn't there some sort of system that stops it going out in case anybody swears? And yes, there is. And it's this long rectangular box there with the yellow and red blinking lights. That's an electronic delay system. What it means is that what is said in the studio, and I'm only talking about, say, controversial phone-ins or features like that, what we say in the studio goes out several seconds after we've actually said it. Now, what we do is that the output of the studio comes into the one end of the box. It is delayed electronically and then merges from the other end of the box and down the wire to the transmitter. In our case, 7 seconds after we've said it. And we can choose any number of seconds we want, but we put 7-second delay on it. And 7 seconds may seem in radio terms an eternity, but actually it's a very short period of time when you've got to decide something like, what is a libel? And we know to our cost at Red Rose that it is easy to libel someone. But you've got 7 seconds to decide. And when you think that libel lawyers can take months just coming to a decision, a very expensive decision, then 7 seconds isn't a very long time at all. So that's the delay system. We also, within this electronic gubbins here, have a system that improves our signal as it goes out to the transmitter. We only have a certain amount of power. This is given to us by the Radio Authority and the Home Office and the various regulatory bodies. We have a certain amount of power on which to broadcast on certain wavelengths. If we had more than that power, if we were broadcasting at more than that power, then we blot somebody else out on the same wavelength or a very close wavelength. So we are restricted. We can't just toddle along to the transmitter and turn the wick up a bit, turn the power up. So the only way that we can improve the reception in fringe areas, and a fringe area is, say, the Lancaster area, is to clean the signal up before it gets to the transmitter. Knock off the top notes, knock off the bottom notes, clean up the signal. You get a cleaner signal into the transmitter, and hopefully it'll go further once the transmitter is radiating the signal out. So that's that. The rest of the stuff actually brings in the satellite service. We get the national, international news on a satellite. It comes into the dish, and it comes into this system here. We can tune into any other radio station we want and hear the output of that there. We can listen into our medium wave output from our own transmitter. We can listen to the FM output from our own transmitter, and all that goes into here and back into the desk, so the presenter can actually find out whether the medium wave transmitter, which is over on a marsh in Longton, is working and what it's sounding like actually from his desk. He can check on the FM transmitter at Winter Hill by exactly the same method. So really, it's an electronic box of tricks which brings signals into the building and takes them out again and sends them to the transmitter. And once it gets to the transmitter, the next job is for you to tune in your radio station accurately to 999 AM or 97.4 FM.
The weekend. Jeff Thomas is out tomorrow, Scotty McClue, live, and Richard Frediani as well. I'll be giving you details of their appearances a little later on.